Chapter 13. Chains of Evidence. The gentle tock-tick of the clock on the wall of the MSI unit was beginning to get to Glenn. The minutes had gradually rolled into hours as he waited to hear back from the College of Arms. He called them soon after the press conference and spoken briefly to a receptionist. Unfortunately, the receptionist had informed him that all of the pursuivants who dealt with family coats of arms were currently unavailable, and that he would pass on Glenn's details as soon as one of them was free. Glenn hated waiting. Normally he would have just got on with something else related with the case, but on this occasion, due to the lack of leads, there wasn't a great deal he could do. The Sockos had finally managed to get away from the island and begun the arduous task of running ballistics tests on the ammunition, DNA sequencing the blood samples, and attempting to match the one and only partial print they had found on the ring. As for the body, Professor Hertzog was in the last few stages of bagging it before shipping it back to the mainland. So for the moment at least, all Glenn could do was sit and watch as the second hand gradually swung round and round the clock face. I can't deal with this. I'm going to get some air, Glenn finally announced, not really addressing anybody in particular, his impatience ultimately getting the better of him. Grabbing his Harris tweed that had eventually dried, he stepped out of the stuffy confines of the mobile unit into the chill of the stiff sea breeze, the remnants of the storm from the previous night. At least the rain had stopped, he thought to himself, as he strolled off down the street with no particular destination in mind. He just needed something to do to kill a bit of time and maybe to organise the jumble of questions still swirling around his head. Turning off West End, he ended up walking along the promenade that formed the boundary between man and nature. The view of the castle seemed so peaceful now, compared to that of the night before, when the wrath of the gods had unleashed a natural power that he never wanted to feel again. Glenn realised that he'd never been in anything quite like it, and had a new-found appreciation for all those brave volunteers of the lifeboat service who risked their lives to save those unlucky enough to become victims of the harsh weather that battered the British coastline. He was still puzzling out why Jack had returned to the castle unannounced. Was he forced against his will to return, or was he complicit? Had his important business trip gone sour, leaving him short of money and required him to steal from his own family? It was just another line of inquiry to add to the steadily growing list of potential avenues to explore the personal financial affairs of Jack St. Aubyn. The family was clearly very well off, to the point of being obscene, but it did not necessarily follow that Jack himself didn't have financial problems. Glenn suddenly realised that he had wandered quite a fair way along the curving promenade, and it was probably time that he got back to the unit, especially as he now had a new line to explore. His phone began to vibrate in his pocket. "Hey boss, just needed to step out for a bit," Glenn said as he answered the call. "Well, I need you to step back in. Jim's bringing the body across, and I want you to accompany him to the autopsy." "Sure thing. Be back in 5, Glenn replied. "Any news from the College of Arms?" "No, not yet. I guess they're still busy." "Okay. We'll get back here as soon as you can. And if they haven't called by the time of the autopsy is finished, give them another nudge. His lordship's plane has just landed, so he'll be back within the next couple of hours." "Sure thing." Oh, and boss, any chance someone can look into Jackson Aubyn's financial situation? Just had a thought he might be struggling for funds and had tried to steal something from the family to raise cash. Maybe he had accomplices that he then fell out with. I'll get one of the other DIs to look into it. Interesting thought. Good to see you exploring all possibilities. See you in a bit, Glenn replied as he hung up the phone and briskly started to make his way back to the quayside where the boat transporting the body back to the mainland would dock. Glenn arrived just after the body had been loaded into the back of a private ambulance. He had to push his way through the crush of photographers, journalists, and locals, all jostling for a good position to see the black body pouch being loaded into the back of the blacked-out private ambulance before it moved off from Mars Island, accompanied by police outriders, to make the 40-minute journey back to the Scientific and Technical Services Unit, STSU, based at Truro. He managed to catch Jim just before he left for Truro. Hey Jim, any chance I can grab a lift? No problem at all. Feel free to tag along. How long do you expect this to take? His father will be back in the next few hours. Well, we know cause of death, so it shouldn't take too long once we get it up on the table. Couple of hours max, I should think. Luckily we don't need to do tox, otherwise you could be waiting for a couple of weeks for the results. In this case it's relatively straightforward. A few photos, try and nail down the type of knife used and see if there are any usable prints, DNA traces that may have been left on the body, etc. Obviously you'll have to wait a bit longer for those to be processed, but I'd be confident to have the basics done pretty quickly. That's a relief. Time is definitely of the essence on this one, Glenn replied with a large yawn. Having been up for hours, tiredness was starting to get the better of him. Take the back seats if you like. Grab a bit of shut-eye. Looks like you need it, Jim suggested, noticing the telltale signs of sleepiness as they approached the awaiting car. I can just about sleep in the front. No way I'm doing this autopsy without some. Thank God I have a driver, that's all I can say. Cheers, Jim. Wondered when I'd be able to catch 40 weeks, Glenn replied as he got into the back of the pathologist's car, and it was not long before sleep took hold of him. The next thing he knew was Jim's voice calling out to him through his subconscious state. Glenn, come on, sleepyhead. The night watchman's waiting. Time to hit the wicket. Huh? Remind me never to take short naps again. Always feel like crap afterwards. Give me a min. Need to focus. Right, okay, let's go, Glenn replied in a half-sleepy voice. Sure you up for a second innings? Yeah, I'll be fine. Let's get this over with. I can see you're not the 40 winks kind of guy. Hell no. Far better just to power through and then pay for it later. Tis what I should have done in the first place, he replied, wiping the last of the sleep from his almost panda-like rings. The outside of the STSU looked as bleak and understated as Glenn expected it to be as he stepped out of the car and followed Jim inside, twisting and turning down a rabbit-like warren of mazes of corridors until Jim stopped outside a metallic silver door marked Autopsy Room 2, with a red and white sign just below saying authorised personnel only. Glenn could not help but feel slightly morbid and solemn as he walked inside the outer scrub room. Try these on for size, Jim said as he passed Glenn a set of surgical scrubs before donning a set himself. Thanks, man. Sure glad I don't have to wear these every day. You get used to it. Right, you ready? Jim replied as he finished washing his hands before pulling on 2 sets of latex gloves. The inner room was almost as bleak and uninspiring as the outside of the building. Its white walls and metallic tables gave the room a very cold, uninviting feel. Not that Glenn was surprised. He had been in many such rooms before. This wasn't really a room that you wanted to end up in if one could avoid it. And if one did, you would hope you would be walking in, rather than being carried in, like a piece of meat to be poked and prodded. The mortuary techs had already laid out the body pouch containing Jack's corpse on the table in the centre of the room, ready for Jim to begin the investigatory process. Jim took out a dictaphone from a drawer in one of the side tables. The lab did actually have a full recording system, but he was old school, and some habits die hard. In a slow and steady voice, he began to talk into the small recording device. 12:30 p.m. on Monday the 29th of October 2012. Autopsy case number 5734. Professor Jim Herzog, Chief Forensic Pathologist of the Scientific and Technical Services Unit for Devon and Cornwall, supervising. Assisting are mortuary technicians Rebecca Graham, who will be assisting both the external and internal examinations, and Robert Watkins, who will be taking photographic evidence and cataloguing evidence collected. Also present in an observatory capacity is Detective Inspector Glenn Harris from the Penzance Constabulary. The body is that of a male in his mid-20s, dressed in black combat gear with what appears to be some sort of black camouflage cream smeared over the face and neck. Robert, can you take some photos, please? Make sure you get some close-ups of the wounds and full frontal aspects of the face with right and left profiles. May help with identification later. I'll take a swab of the camo cream for analysis before we clean it up, Professor Herzog said, before he began to use an earbud-type swab to collect a sample of the camo cream, inserting it into a screw-top test tube and clearly labelling it. Right, Becky, you can clean the face now. So Robert can take some pictures of it without the camouflage. Glenn, after this, will send the body over to the radiographer to get some x-rays. It'll give us an idea if there are any metal fragments left in any of the wounds. We should get some dental x-rays, which could help with your ID. You're leaving the clothes on for this? Glenn asked. We do both, with and without the clothing. Just the procedure that we have to follow. We have to do it by the book. Can't afford to step outside the rules. If this went to court, the defence could tear us apart for straying from procedure. Got to make sure you have the best chance of catching your man. How long will it take? If it's going to be long, I might step out to make some calls until you're ready to do the internal examination. Probably be an hour or so, Jim replied. In that case, I'll leave you to it. Give me a shout when you're going to start. We'll let you know when play will resume. The time is 12:40. D.I. Glenn Harris is leaving the room. Jim added into the dictaphone. Glenn left the room, walking back into the scrubbing area, depositing the used medical scrubs into a bin before he headed off in the direction of reception. Is there a free office somewhere I can use to make a few calls? Glenn asked at the desk. I'll just go check for you. There should be one free on the next floor up, the receptionist replied, as she picked up the phone receiver and dialed a number. Hi, I've got a DI down here who's wondering if they can use an office for a bit while they're waiting for some results. Is there any chance he can use the meeting room? Glenn couldn't make out the response, so he had to wait until the receptionist had put the phone down. Looks like the meeting room is available. Up the stairs to the first floor and then second room on the left. You can't miss it. Big glass double doors. Thanks, much appreciated. You're welcome. Can you give me a shout when Jim is ready to start the internal examination? Certainly. Great, thanks again, Glenn replied, as he headed off from the desk to find the meeting room. Taking a seat in one of the leather-backed office chairs in the meeting room, Glenn took out his phone and called the number for the College of Arms. By any luck, one of the pursuivants would now be available. Hi, DI Glenn Harris speaking. I called earlier today regarding a case that I'm working on. Oh yes, I remember. I was actually about to call you. I have managed to speak to the Rouge Croix pursuivant. He is most interested in your case and would be happy to help with an identification of the coat of arms you have found. Ah, no way. That's great. I could do with all the help I can get right now. Is he available at the moment? I think so. Is it okay if I just put you on hold for a minute while I check? Sure thing, Glenn replied, before the standard classical music began to come through the line. Glenn was never one for waiting, but at least he knew that there was a beginning of some light at the end of what had begun to feel like a pretty dark tunnel. Glenn drummed his finger on the table in front of him whilst he waited, not noticing that he was drumming to the rhythm of the classical tune. D.I. Harris, thank you for waiting. He is available. I'll transfer you now. Fantastic. Thank you. I hope he can be of some help, the receptionist replied, before transferring Glenn to the pursuivant's private line. Good afternoon, D.I. Harris. Leonard Petronella speaking. I understand from the receptionist that you have a piece of evidence pertaining to a current case bearing an unusual coat of arms. Yes, sir. That's correct. It was found on the remnants of what we believe to be a signet ring. I have tried to search for it online, but so far without any success. I was hoping that you may be able to help. Well, I will see what I can do. The college does have extensive records, many of which you will not be able to find online, especially if the coat of arms is no longer in use or has become obscure. What does it contain? It has a squirrel cracking a nut between its paws and what looks like a Maltese cross behind its back. The end of the squirrel's tail sort of curls into the center of the cross. Interesting. Not one that I would know off the top of my head, but then there are so many different coats of arms, and quite a lot with squirrels. Is there a motto of any kind? Yes, there appears to be the word Veritas et Space engraved onto the shoulders of the ring. Ah, truth and hope. Fine motto. That should help to narrow it down a bit. I don't suppose you would be able to send me any pictures of the item. I realise it is a piece of evidence, nevertheless it would be helpful to actually visualise it. Sure thing. I have some photos on my phone that I can happily email across. I presume you can't really give me an idea of how long it will take to research? Unfortunately not. It all depends on how quickly we can link the clues to what we have in our records. What area of the country was it found in? We may be able to start by looking at local families and work out from there. It was found near Penzance. At present I can't be more specific for obvious reasons. I think I can guess, judging on what I've just seen on the news this morning. Such a shame. A real tragedy, if it turns out to be Jackson Torben. He was a real bright spark, that one. You knew him? Well, not very well, but yes, I did have the pleasure of crossing paths a few times. The only time we really spoke at any length was when I designed his crest for his family coat of arms, for which, of course, there had to be a meeting to discuss his preferences. Oh, I thought they were passed down through the family. Well, yes and no. The family does have a coat of arms, but then each member will have their own variation of that. And before you ask, the question is no. What you have is not Jack's. Shame. Would have made this a lot simpler. What's your email? I'll send you the photos right away. Now, that I'm afraid you'll have to get off the website. Unfortunately, I can never remember the bloody thing. It's like trying to remember my mobile number. Really modern technology. I can use a computer and a phone, but can't for the life of me keep track of all the numbers and addresses. All those bloody .coms, .cos, .uks, .govs, .orgs. Drives me up the wall sometimes. One day I'm sure I'll forget my own name, and then I really will be in trouble, the pursuivant said, with a slight laugh. Yeah, I have the problem with that myself sometimes. Although, normally with car keys, Glenn replied jokingly. I'll find your address on the website, and we can go from there. Thank you for your time, sir, and I hope we'll speak again soon. Not at all, any time. Hanging up, Glenn quickly looked up the Rouge Croix pursuivant's email and typed out a brief email on his phone with some of the photos he had taken attached and sent it. He had hoped that he would have got an answer over the phone, but understood that as there were so many coats of arms, it would take the pursuivant some time to research it. It was irritating, although he was beginning to make some progress at last. He still felt as if the tunnel had just got ever so slightly longer, and that the light that had been getting closer had just dimmed a little. For every step forward he took, it seemed that he was destined to take 3 back. He hoped that he would begin to make some real progress soon, otherwise he feared this could become one of those cases that remained unsolved, that irksome one-off that could end up bugging him for the rest of his career. Glenn's thoughts were cut short by the receptionist bursting into the room in somewhat of a flutter. Dear Harris, please, you must come quick. We have a bit of a situation downstairs. What's wrong? Lord St. Leven has arrived and is demanding to see his son's body. Obviously we can't allow that at the moment, and it's still in X-ray, but he won't take no for an answer. He's kicking up an awful fuss. Oh, okay, I'll be right down. Where is he at the moment? Being restrained by some security in the lobby. Great, just what I need now. An angry lord, Glenn replied, as he got up and hurriedly followed the receptionist down to the lobby. Before Glenn even reached the lobby to the sight of the Lord of the Mount, being fully restrained by 2 burly security guards, he could already hear the commotion. Know who I am? I demand that you release me. Let me go. I'm fully within my rights to see my son. Do you not understand? That's my son's body in there. Let me go. the irate and grief-stricken voice of Lord St. Levan clearly resonating up the staircase. "It's okay, guys. Let him go," Glenn said, barely looking at the two guards as he descended into the lobby. The two men stared at him in disbelief, and one was about to object, but was cut short by Glenn's repetition. "Let him go." "Thank you," the Lord said, straightening his jacket as the two guards reluctantly released hold of him. "Now, can I see my son?" "I'm afraid it ain't as simple as that," Glenn calmly replied, quickly raising his hand before the Lord interrupted again. "Please, your Lordship, can we talk first? There are things that we need to go through. I'm not saying that you can't see the body, just not right this minute. Please. I understand it's a difficult time, being a father myself. I know I would want answers too if this happened to my child. But this has to be done this way." Glenn waited for the Lord to reply. Watching his eyes, he could see the internal struggle that the man was going through. On the one hand, the raw emotion that was firmly in control and driving his passionate demands to see the body, and on the other, the calm rationale of the years, making the case that maybe he needed to take a step back. "Very well, if this is the only way, then I will oblige. But I still expect to see the body. I want to see my boy." "All in good time. Please, your Lordship, this way," Glenn replied, gesturing for him to take the stairs that Glenn had recently descended. Turning to the receptionist, "We'll use the meeting room if that's okay. Just tell Jim that it's all under control and I'll be with him as soon as I can." "That's fine. I'll make sure you're not disturbed." "Thanks. Oh, and can you sort out some tea or coffee? I think his Lordship's gonna need it." "I'll make sure some is brought up." "Thanks," Glenn replied, as he began to walk back up the stairs with Lord St. Levan. "Just here, your Lordship. Please, take a seat." "Thank you. Now what can you tell me about my son's death?" "Well, to be honest, sir, we haven't officially identified the body as that of your son's. This is one of the reasons why we couldn't let you see the body. Did your son have any birthmarks or distinguishing features that would help us to identify him?" "No, he didn't have any birthmarks. Can't I just look at the body?" Well, it's not a pretty sight. Not something I would encourage a parent to have to see, if we can avoid it." "Did he wear any specific jewelry to him?" "Well, as a matter of fact, yes. There was a signet ring that he always seemed to wear, although not the family one, much to mine and his mother's displeasure." "Oh, really? What was it?" Had a squirrel and a cross on it. Bloody thing. Never understood why he chose to wear that over the family one. He never did give me a proper explanation." "Do you know how he came to have it?" "A gift from a friend, I think. Must have been a very dear friend indeed to choose that over the family. We had several discussions about it, but he never took it off." "I take it you don't know which friend?" "No, he never did say." "Well, unfortunately, we didn't find a ring on the body. Anything else that might help? And injuries that left a scar?" Glenn deliberately left out the fact that he'd found that very ring at the scene. He did break his leg when he was still at school, which required an operation and pins. I remember he was hobbling around on crutches for months. That might be enough. They're x-raying the body at the moment, so if it is your son, they should find the pins. If it turns out to be the case that they can match the pins, can I make a request from one father to another to see him? I take on board what you're saying about the state of the body, as in, nevertheless, I would like to see him if I could. I'm not promising anything, but I'll see what I can arrange. I can assure you we are doing everything we can to ascertain what happened to your home. I understand. I can wait. Glenn left his lordship staring out of the first floor window of the meeting room and ventured out to find out what Jim had found from the x-rays. Slipping on the now familiar set of medical scrubs, Glenn prepared himself to enter the autopsy room for a second time. "Ah, you're back in play, I see," Jim said as he stood up straight from peering over the now naked corpse. "I was just about to ring you to say we were starting the internal examination. Good timing. Jim, before you start, can I have a quick word? In private," Glenn added, glancing at the two mortuary technicians in the room. "Sure. Give me a second, guys. We shall resume presently," Jim said to the two techs as he made a quick note in the dictaphone about pausing the autopsy and followed Glenn into the scrub room. "So what's up? Did you find anything in the x-rays?" "Not much, apart from a few metal fragments in the chest and knee, which I was about to remove for analysis," Jim replied in a tone that hinted that he was less than pleased by the interruption to the process. "Anything else?" "Oh yes, pins in the leg. An old injury. Would have been quite a nasty break at the time by the looks." "I was afraid you were going to say that." "Oh, why?" "His lordship mentioned that his son had pins in his leg from a break he suffered at school." "Ah, oh dear. That is sad news indeed. He wants to see the body." "Well, you certainly can't show him it in this state. That's enough to give anybody nightmares. I'll tell you what, let's finish the autopsy, clear up, etc., and make it as presentable as possible. And then he can see it, as long as the serial numbers on the pins match up." "Sure, that sounds like a good idea. I'll let him know. How long do you think it'll be?" Well, several hours yet. There's a lot more to do than I had first anticipated." "Okay, I'll suggest he puts himself up somewhere for the night, and he can see it in the morning. Sound fair?" "Yeah, that would suit. Now I really must get on. Are you going to watch?" No, I think I've seen enough for one day. I still have a few questions about Jack's financial situation for his lordship." "That's fine. I hope you find your answers you're looking for," Jim said before returning to the autopsy room. Glenn left to the sound of Jim's voice saying, "Right, people, let play resume. Sorry for the unscheduled stoppage. Now let's have a look at what we've got." Glenn smiled, knowing that the autopsy was in good hands, and left the room to return to the Lord of the Mount.